All right, so we've got a lot to talk about. This video is going to be pretty epic, but if you guys are new here on the channel, hello, my name's Brian. If you're a returning subscriber, welcome back, you magnificent beast. That's what you get for subscribing, by the way. Free compliments at the start of these videos. To keep this simple and keep this straightforward and its introduction as short as possible, if there's any specific question that you're interested in my answer specifically, check the playhead, check YouTube for the chapters. That way you can jump to any section of this video that you like. And I hope that you enjoy the full conversation that Josh and I had regarding his epic video. If you guys haven't seen that one, that will also be linked and tagged in this video as well. So hopefully you guys get a chance to go check that video out, because then it features multiple content creators. I don't know why I'm struggling with my words today. It must be a Tuesday. Anyhow, the other thing about this is that before we jump into the video, I am going to be doing a charity stream on August the 12th. That's going to be over on Twitch. The link is in the description. We're going to be raising money for St. Jude's. So if you guys have not, seen that announcement, note that this is also going to act as that as well. Again, you guys can come. You can win some cool prizes. We're going to be giving away some Amazon gift cards and hopefully raising some money for St. Jude's. Now, originally I set my goal at $200, and y'all have already crushed that goal, so we've increased the goal a little bit and see how we can do. This is gonna be my first ever charity stream, so hopefully you will join me on the 12th. All the details should be in the description of this video, but that's all I wanted to say. Guys, I hope you enjoy this interview. I hope you enjoy my answers. Thank you so much for checking it out, and hopefully I'll see you in my next video. But until then, enjoy. Let's do it. Okay, Brian has thoughts. I do. Oh, you're fine. I do the content creation, so my wife, feels like I can get it out of my system. So it's like Julie, oh my gosh, I got to tell you about this update. And she's like, why don't you just go make a video? I'm like, good idea, great idea. Let me go do that.
Well, let's start with one of the most basic ones. Number one on this is the actual audience size of the MMORPG content creation network. And this isn't necessarily the amount of people that play MMOs, because I feel that is much smaller than people expect and think it is anyway. But then the amount of people that consume MMO content, which is a fraction of a fraction. Because you look at games like Call of Duty and FIFA and League of Legends and that kind of stuff, Minecraft, millions, multi-millions, and the videos are getting multiple millions of views. You become a League of Legends streamer or a YouTube content creator, you're going to have a massive audience. The MMORPG landscape simply isn't as big as people think it is. Right. Do you think the audience have a slightly skewed perspective, especially when people are very enfranchised within their game and everyone they talk to plays the games, they assume everyone in the world plays the game? Do you think the audience have a bit of a skewed view about how popular the MMO genre actually is?
Yes, absolutely. And also to even pivot off that, the idea that within just the label of MMORPG, that there is actually any idea of a community. I think the term MMORPG community is in and of itself an oxymoron. It's not to insult people who love MMORPGs, but you can just go out to any, the main subreddit, but any space. MMOs are I think almost in a way tribal by nature and by business model, but within that space, then you could talk about within people who enjoy the content, not just play the games, but enjoy the content, people who then go about and share their opinion in a comment or a tweet or even post on the Reddit or even the fraction of a fraction of a fraction. And so MMORPGs are very niche. I look at WoW as kind of the one-hit wonder example from a music band, where in a way that actually kind of hurts that band. They just get known and they blow up for this one thing, and then everything else after that really has struggled. And I apply that same kind of concept within the genre itself, because I think that if you got 10 people to try and define what is an MMO, you're going to get 10 completely different answers. And within that group of 10 people and 10 different answers, some of those people are going to absolutely hate the answer the other person gives. And so then there becomes this massive little bit of friction that just kind of cues into it. But that's just my take.
That's perfect, man. I'm probably not going to be able to use the full answers from everyone. It's going to be kind of like seconds and sound bites. But yeah. I'm going to try and cut it down as concise as I possibly can. Unrelated to that, there's a video about the band that wrote the song Cherry Pie. The lead singer actually took his own life because of that song. He hated it. He was a proper rock band guy, and his manager said, we need a hit. We need a pop song. So he wrote She's My Cherry Pie. And then that took off, and no one knows any other song from that band. Like, that was it. He became the cherry pie guy. He was invited on to, any of these Top of the Pops things and told, oh, just do cherry pie and then leave. That's all he became. It absolutely took over his life. So when you're trying to explain to someone, hey, I play MMO games, and they're like, what is that? You go, it's World of Warcraft. Yeah, that's the one game that you will know. So let's go into you said hate, which actually segues very nicely into this next question. MMORPGs are uniquely set up within the hobby sphere because they don't just enhance someone's life, they actively try to become it. Now, you have toxic elements in any hobby, whether it's knitting or sewing or running or Magic the Gathering or World of Warcraft, but MMORPGs don't just give you a game to play, they give you a second existence, a second world to be in, your character, your avatar. They're almost saying, hey, we know your real life is over here, but this is your online life now, this is your world, this is your family. And the danger of this happens when the players start to see the game as more than a game, as a lifeline, as a personality trait, as a whole character unto themselves. And this can mean that critique against the game can often be seen as a personal attack against an enfranchised player. You say something negative about their game, the game is the whole life, it's seen as negative against them. When making content for MMORPG games, do you feel, not necessarily at risk, but do you feel the weight of potential negativity from the extreme elements of the fan base if you say something bad about their game?
I don't, because I don't try to make content creation my be all end all. But and being that I've got kids, like if I was like, this is my job, oh, absolutely. Because then I would have to feel like I need to pick my words very carefully, and I would avoid certain subjects because of that. Have I felt the sting from the MMO community? Well, yeah, because you're right. Some people, like everybody, we talked about this on the podcast, everybody has a favorite Pokemon. Everybody has not maybe just their identity, but it's their community. And if the perception that you might be preventing others from checking out their game, there's a risk. It also works in both ways. I got so much hate because people accuse me of being the reason why Asmongold was playing 14, despite the fact that he's only reacted to a handful of my videos. I doubt he has ever been like, oh, this ginger guy, okay, fine, I will go and play this game. But I got that level of kickback. So it actually kind of works in weird ways. It's this weird gatekeeping mentality where you're going to say what we want you to say within this, here's the approved space. And we're also not going to talk about it in this way because we don't want these type of players, coming into our space. And so if I was doing this full time, I would absolutely feel that sting, and it would be a lot of extra anxiety because I know that, I want, and I believe that honesty and authenticity within content is more important than somebody's feelings about a game. But then again, I have the freedom of all right, I go to a job that pays my bills. I just make content creation for the fun of it. Yeah. So if you don't like what I have to say, then that's fine. I believe that all voices, I believe actually more in the context of why somebody believes something, right? If you're only going to spend, or let's say you love crafting, you just absolutely adore crafting in an MMO, and the crafting in this one MMO is not to your liking, but everything else seems to be really interesting. It's guys, I'm not a raider, I'm not this, but I'm a big crafter, and this either hits it home for me or this doesn't. I believe setting the context of how I came to the opinion is really the valued aspect, because again, when you talk about the fraction of the fraction of the fraction, I think the majority of people listen and they can for themselves reason out where they connect with you or me. That's the same thing I do with a review. If you one of the things that frustrates me about IGN is that there's not big MMO players on staff that actually like MMOs. So we got to take this guy who doesn't like MMOs, and the reviews all say it's an MMO. That's the review. And so it's not there's no real okay, you like MMOs, what do you like about this, what do you like about that, and having a wealth of understanding of how different MMOs approach different problems, I think is valuable. But
that actually feeds really nicely into the next question. Mentioning IGN, spot on, really nice stuff just there.
I'm a great guest.
This is good. This is good. You've got a lot of sound bites already. This is fantastic. Let's go on to point 3. The risks of being a general channel versus specializing into a game. So being a general MMORPG channel means you do get to play lots of games, and you get to title your videos to hit lots of people's recommended lists. You get to add the title, Guild Wars 2, Elder Scrolls Online, New World, Final Fantasy, all this kind of stuff. But the danger is you never become specialized. You never know every detail, every item, every weapon, every raid, every single thing. You never become like an authority, if you will, but you do get a general overview.
You then become an authority of the general, but go ahead.
But if you try to specialize into a single game, say Final Fantasy, you do end up knowing every item, every weapon, every raid, every skill, every class. But the risk of doing this is you're tying either yourself as a personality or your channel to the game. And if the game fails, it likely brings your channel down with it as well. We've seen people who made channels focused on Wildstar or on Terra or on Neverwinter, and more recently, people who went all in on New World. And now, because New World has seen a massive viewer decrease and player decrease, we're seeing views that they're now as well. What do you think the risks or the benefits or the advantages are to being a general MMO channel compared to being a specialist channel? How would you compare the two?
I think algorithmically, you're setting yourself up for a world of depression and anxiety and even mental health problems that they're going to challenge you and push you and make you question your own sanity. So the thing about being generalized, it's very valuable to your mental health. The thing about being specific is that, especially if this is something that you desire to do as a career, as a because people say like, I want to be a YouTuber. And for me, I'm just like, that's interesting. Like, I've just never thought of that as a career minded, but that's one of the most popular things. So this is what people are gearing up to. And people come to me all the time. I want to be the 14 PvP guy. I'm like, go for it. I'm going to always be encouraging, but knowing that that's a niche within the niche within the niche within the niche for that specific game. I think it's healthy for the content creator to have that generalization. I think the algorithm punishes you for that. And so the solution that I've actually developed is what I do is multi-channel. So I have a New World focused channel and it does great. I have a Final Fantasy focused channel. It does fantastic. I'm not going to be able to specifically focus in on each and every game, but I have 13 years with Final Fantasy 14. Like, I've already put in the work. I know the game. And therefore, like any new content that comes out, I only have to study the new stuff because I've already got the memory of the old stuff. But when it comes down to it, like, yeah, I think a handful of games is the best way, but algorithmically, you have to actually multi-channel because the algorithm is going to hit you. And what you see then, and the people who don't follow that pathway, they have to lean more into the clickbaity and more sensationalized headlines. Not that the content is clickbait. It's like, we're going to really talk about this hot topic, but ultimately you'll see the audience, the community kind of get burned out on that each and every time. Cause it's like, oh, is it really that big of a deal? Not everything's that big of a deal, but if you want the algorithm to even push that video to you, you might have subscribed because Brian talks about Final Fantasy, or maybe you subscribe because Brian likes to talk about Destiny, 20 times a year. That's like, that seems to be my limit. Then when I'm not talking about that, you don't watch those videos. And so when I do talk about that, it has to be something really strong, or YouTube doesn't even think you're interested in watching it in the first place. So the risk, I think, ends up being that you have a content creator who's going to get confused if they don't know what they're stepping into. And then you're going to have an algorithm that's going to work against you. And so you're not going to have the freedom to express yourself in a way that you want to. And so what's helped me out just dramatically is like, okay, I want to talk about New World. I want to go post on that. And the videos do great because the algorithm knows, the audience in and of itself has declined, but audiences come and go. That's the nature of them. But then it knows how to find it and put that video to people who really want that kind of content. And I don't have to sit here and say, I gotta come in now with because it's better for me to not post a video if I don't want to talk about it. And that's the thing. Like, oh, if I don't want to talk about New World today, guess what? I don't have to. I can go talk about what I want, and I just need to put it in a way that the system's going to actually make it easy for me. And that's just the nature of my software engineering. I'm like, there's seriously a problem here. YouTube in and of itself is making this a problem, and it's not good for the viewer and it's not good for the creator. And so there's a real risk to generalization. but the creator has to, like, you cannot be a one note person, because at some point you're going to want to play another game. And that's good, because having context of what other people are doing, even if it's not the thing that you're like, I'm going to know life this other game, that's better for you as a human being.
That's good.
You know?
I like that. The idea of you're going to want to play another game. And we've seen it time and time again with people who make channels dedicated to one game, and then they effectively finish the game that they've done. They've done maxed every class, done every quest, done every raid, got every item, and the audience is there going, do more. And the guy's being like, I can't do any more. I've done everything. So now I'm going to make a new channel almost to do another game. And the first channel, it suffers. That was love. That was a really detailed answer, man. Thank you for that.
And just for your knowledge, like the algorithm doesn't need you to post on the game you're done with every single day. In fact, you could literally like if you're making a career out of it, like, okay, I'm going to post on this every 2 weeks. I have a Blue Protocol channel, and that game's probably not coming out for 2 or 3 years. But the videos do really great whenever there's any information to put out there. And I've posted like once every 2 months. And it's just that, hey, there's stuff we want to talk about. And then it's like, I'm not telling you this is a channel that's going to be like everything you've always wanted forever and ever. And so it gives me a lot more peace, hands down. I get a lot more peace because I get to talk about what I want, and I don't have to work against the algorithm. I feel like you're trying to always go upstream. I'm letting the algorithm work for me.
Let's go on to the next question, which is a really interesting one for me, actually. And this is the sheer amount of time that an MMO takes to finish, and the amount of time that a lot of the player base expect a reviewer to put into it before making any content on the game whatsoever. Now, whenever I'm talking to people either in game or on Reddit or on Discord, the number 100 hours gets thrown around a lot, and I think it's just because it's a nice round number. It's the nice easy number. If you want to review, you can know what the game is like 20 or 30 hours in, but if you want to make a detailed review, you've got to put like 100 hours in. It's just a number that I see a lot of people say to me. So I went back and I had a look. So I've got a second channel where I review classic games like PlayStation 1 games and stuff. I did some maths. I was able to do 10 games: Castlevania Symphony of the Night, Devil May Cry, Silent Hill, Tomb Raider, Baldur's Gate, Armored Core, Medieval, Soul Reaver, Tenchu, and Rayman. Collectively, it took me 96 hours to finish all of those games, which means you can finish 10 of the most classic games in less time than people expect you to put to hit the bare minimum to review an MMORPG. So if you are reviewing a new game, especially with the algorithm wanting content out constantly, how long do you think a content creator can realistically put into a new MMORPG, or even an old MMO they're playing for the first time, before reviewing it? What's a realistic amount of time to expect someone to put in?
You could put 0 minutes into it, as long as you set the context of like, hey, I just booted up the game and here's my initial thought. Like, I think a lot of people want that level of authority because essentially the people look for reviews to validate their own feelings, in that regards. So I wouldn't put an hour limit on it. I think when it comes down to it, like 1,000 hours makes you considered an expert in something of that nature. So if they're saying 100 hours is going to qualify for review, so it's like I'm 1/10 of an expert on the subject, for an MMORPG, I think it's not about the time. It's about the context of what you've experienced, what you maybe have experienced before, where you're coming from, and then essentially kind of talking about what systems you've touched and engaged with. But the reviews, I think, ultimately have changed. I don't think anybody is really looking for, what's a 10 out of 10, right? Like, I got into a problem back when I was in my 20s where I was like, I consider myself a review snob. Oh, that game's not at least a 9.0 or greater, I'm not going to play it. And I ended up missing out on a lot of really good games. And that's on me. And so nowadays I don't look for reviews. I might hop on a live stream, catch a little bit of gameplay, and then make a decision whether I want to jump in or not. But if you're going to review an MMORPG, I think it's about establishing a set of, this is what I've experienced, this is the time, and just being honest about that experience. And then essentially asking, let's say you did 10 hours in an MMO and you wanted to make a video about it. Well, I think that essentially then the video should be then asking the question, am I willing to invest another 10 hours or another 30 hours into the game, right? Because that's essentially what I would be curious about and be looking for if you came and said, hey, Brian, let's say I built an MMO and you're like, I'm going to check out Brian's MMO. We're friends. Let's check it out. Let's go and see what's going on. And you play 10 hours of it. Like, I would be watching your video to see if, like, is he willing to give it even more time? Because you made a really good video talking about how long does a game need to spend to get good? Because if I told you, Josh, like, this game really gets good at hour 100, like, that's asking a lot. That's asking a lot of anybody. I got 5 kids, dude. Yeah. Like, it's like, and that's one of the things that I always set the context is like, I'm not going to be the first to clear the raid. I'm not going to be the first at max level. I don't care. Like, I am perfectly fine with not being first with the experience. I'm going to take care of my kids. I'm going to take care of my family. But when you burn out, you'll come back in a year and, like, here I am. I chip away. I don't burn out of games. When I don't want to play a game, I stop. And
that's
then,
the healthy way of doing it. Yeah.
Well, this is so funny because you ever do that self-reflection on your own gaming library and you're like, oh, I think I see a pattern. Like, I stopped playing Final Fantasy VII and I came back a year later and finished like when it was out, like when it was a new game. And then I started thinking, I was like, I've done that with every Final Fantasy. Like, every Final Fantasy, I will play it up to a point in the story. And then for some reason, I'll take a couple of months to a year off and then I'll come back and finish it. And that was every game that I've ever like played. I always kind of like play it to a point where I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go play something else, or I got life things, I got school, family things, blah blah blah, so
I always find it strange as well with MMOs that people will say, put 100 hours in, it gets good, or put 50 hours in, it gets good. But if you do that with any other form of media, it's weird. Someone says, hey, watch this TV show for 50 hours and then the episodes get good, or read the first 5 books in a series because the 6th is really good. Everyone else tends to ask, why don't we just start at 5 then? Why don't we just start with this bit? Why? And I think it's very strange. MMOs almost have this self-indulgent design nature where they expect a player to slog through an inferior experience in order to reward them with a superior experience. And very few other media does that.
One of the things that I look at, especially when I look at an MMO, why, like, for me, New World resonates really deep because it reminds me a lot of Final Fantasy XI, but at the same time also taking in new standards. And so one of the things I looked at, like, have you seen like the history of MMORPGs and where it all went wrong?
Not yet. No, it's on the to-watch list. It's a long to-watch list.
It's a long video, but it's incredibly good. But clearly the author of that, the creator of that video, I think resonates with what I view as an MMORPG, is that, like, that kind of, you look at the old school kind of multiplayer aspects. But one of the things they really hit on is the concept of WoW turned everybody into locusts, and so that the game really begins when the game is in its end game. And one of the things I kept telling people when New World launched was like, don't think of Endgame starting at level 60. If you approach it with a game that Endgame begins at level 1, you're going to have a much more enjoyable experience, because everybody rushes to level 60 and then they had what at the time was the waterfall system. Now it's the expertise system. But it's like, I'm like, yeah, but my end game actually began at level 1. I was dominating the economy. I'm doing all this. It's like, I'm leveling, and I'm like, again, I'm just going to chip away. I'm not going to, like, my wife is not going to approve of me taking, 300 hours this week to be playing video games and not bringing in any money. Sorry, work. I got, can't come to work today. I got New World. But no, it's like when you have that mindset, like, that's the same with Final Fantasy 11. It's like the end game begins at level 1. Like, if you have that mindset that you're not rushing and grinding and, throwing everything away because you got to get to the end because that's what you've been trained on, then essentially I think you actually have a better experience. It's more, like, oh, this is that other life. This is this extra, plane of existence that I can have. And there's like game systems that you can engage with. But I don't know if that answers your question, but that's just how I've always,
this is great.
I approached the same thing with WoW. Like, I tried playing WoW and I was like, no, this game sucks. Like, it just, there was like, there was nobody around. I was like, all
Locust
right.
is a good example. The word locust is just, it brings to mind this perfect image of just a swarm of players wanting the content. Let's go on to the next one, which is an interesting question. This is more about the nature of content about MMORPGs and the changing nature of them. This is a more complex deep dive into it. MMORPGs are changing as games. They're having updates, they're having expansions, they're having patch notes, which means if you put out a video based on an MMORPG, that video is only relevant until the game is updated and changed, or the system that you talk about is switched around. This means that as a content creator, you're often sat there thinking, I could create this incredibly deep review. It'll take me 100 hours, it'll take me 200 hours, it'll be edited to perfection, but it'll only be relevant for the next 6 months. I'm releasing videos that I know have a shelf life, like a predestined, they're going to become obsolete at some point. Yeah. Because of this, content creators are often driven to create content that a lot of the general audience see as more vapid and see as easier. Things like, should you play X game in X year, that you just repeat every year? What's the best build that you just make every few months? You know, here's the best skilling method that is normally just copied off the wiki. And the audience don't like this kind of content because they see it as low effort. But then the audience often don't consider the fact that high effort content, especially in the MMO world, has such a short shelf life.
Yeah.
What kind of internal discussions do you have with yourself? With the changing nature of MMOs, is it worth making longer videos over shorter videos when you know they're both going to release and become obsolete eventually?
This is absolutely so true, because we've often stated, Chris and I've kind of like had our little powwows, like the more time you spend on a video, the less views it will get. And that's just like, and I always would say like, well, if I want to put that time into this video because it's important to me, then I will. But you would find that what ends up being, and I find that critique that some people have leveraged, and they're like, oh man, you know, I want higher quality, I want this, I want that. And it's like, the thing is that when it comes down to it, is that maybe one person does. I often find that like a lot of people feel like they'll say that, like you get a lot of feedback. I see content creators complain about this all the time, saying, oh, I thought you were going to show up, like you guys said you'd show up for whatever I'm playing, right? And then no one does. The people who care are already going to show up anyway, but anybody's like, yeah, I'll watch whatever. It's like, no, it's an 80-20 at best. They're there for 80% is there for the game, 20% at best is there for you, maybe 90-10. Like it's gonna, vary, right? So when it comes down to it, like it's not low effort content, it's the content that people are asking for. And the content creator can sit down and say like, oh, I want to make something. I see people do this all the time. Like and it's important. I'll make videos that I want to make that I know aren't going to do well on purpose, because I wanted to make that video. I wanted that video to exist. But at its core, what are people asking for? What are people searching for? What are, like, you go onto Reddit, like even that Reddit can be like a very toxic and kind of one-sided approach. I've even remarked on this on the forums. People will tell me that they will not submit their feedback to the devs because they're just going to get hated on the forums. And I'm like, yeah, devs need to create a direct way so that you don't have to open up your feedback to public scrutiny. Not that they have to take your feedback and do anything with it, because your feedback could suck, but you're now pulling yourself out of the pool of that feedback. But like you go onto Reddit, like these are the questions that people are asking. These are the questions that people are hungry for. And the smart thing is to create stuff that people want, because I mean, especially if you want it to be viewed, it's the concept when people are like, oh, you just posting that for the views. Who hits anything on a public space and hopes that no one sees it? Like, who's sitting here like, guys, I reached this, please don't look at it.
It's almost, it's just, I find myself in this position where I'm thinking I could create a well-researched academic video, because I love making academic stuff. It's my background, it's what I enjoy. It brings me happiness to research and try and critique and analyze these systems. And I think I could make a detailed research, analytical takedown or discussion or dissection of a system, just one system within a game, and make like a half-hour video, and I know it won't do well. And in the same time that I could have taken to make that video, I could have made 10 should you play popular MMO in current year. And all I would need to do is put 10 minutes worth of this is good, this is bad, here's a review, here's some footage, bang it out. It's going to get 1 million views. It's going to get 500,000 views. It's going to do really well.
Especially for you.
Yeah,
especially for you. Like, your size,
And I'm
like,
thinking...
But generally speaking, like I look at those videos as easily 300 to 500K.
Yeah.
Like that's what people want. And the algorithm loves it. Now, on your research video, what I would counter in the new meta is that you would make that video, Asmon would react to that video, you would react to Asmon's reaction, and that's where essentially then the value would be driven. And and people can kind of like be frustrated or meme or whatever, but like, no, that's what the algorithm is wanting. Like, I sit down and I did the analysis of it, because I did some reaction videos, and I was like, I just don't feel good about making reaction content. Like, there's something here that that I'm like, well, you know what? Like I want them to get the thing. I'm obviously not like the size where I'm like, maybe like you could talk about signal boosting. And I stopped. I was like, nah, I'm good. Like I made a couple reactions and then I kind of moved on. And then I was like, oh, now I had some reactions made of me. And then I went and looked at the numbers, and it's like my reaction videos were 100 times better for me than being reacted to by Asmon. Like it's like, generally speaking, like 1 to 3% maybe is the kind of the click through. But over on making a reaction, I'm getting, almost 1,000 subs off of like a reaction that I make versus like, okay, I picked up 50 from Asmon reacting to me, and people are like,
reactions to you don't do as much as people think they do. And after you've had 1 or 2 videos reacted to, after you've been exposed to that audience, repeated reactions do very, very little. The reactor is gaining so much more than the person they're reacting to.
And so, like, when I looked at, in terms of like the content creation, just on this little tangent, is that, it's clear that you need to be making reaction content as opposed to being reacted to. And so that's where it's like the reaction to the reaction, I think, is actually genius. That like I started seeing you do that, and I was like, that's so smart. Like that's absolutely the way to go.
I've double dipping, It's double dipping into the algorithm, man. And you can't even the person that you're reacting to can't then get annoyed because they're reacting to you in the first place anyway.
Right. And but what's interesting, what I want to see like within that meta itself, because what I started to do is that if I do a full reaction, I just say I'm going to give some of the money that this video does to the original guy, because it's like, that takes whatever this weird sense of guilt that I have off of me. It's like, listen, like this is the thing I need to do, and people clearly want it. Like I have like 10 videos that were just sent to me by everybody, like, hey, we want you to see this, we want to see that, and I was like, cool, like, okay, that's in. And then then I do that because that's what I want. Hopefully within YouTube, like when you start to look at the TikTok mentality, like it's just automatically built in and linked in and algorithmically it shares.
It's super annoying that YouTube actually has a revenue share system for cover songs already. If you as an artist do a cover song, you can link who the main artist is and revenue just goes to them. You just do that for reaction videos. YouTube have the ability to set this up, but they don't want to set it up because they know that reaction content is so popular and they want people to make it, and they don't want to discourage people from making it. And if you tell people, hey, if you react
I would think that it would discourage, though. Like I think that like if all of a sudden it gets handled in the back end from and I know we're talking about revenue, but it's like the watch time and the likes are just as important. But it's like if that was something that was like just kind of brought in, I honestly, I think that would encourage me to make more content that I would hope people would react to.
I feel super happy to it, because then you'd feel that everyone is benefiting and not just you.
Right. So back to like the whole point of what you're asking is like your analytical video. Like I think that would be better, because then all of a sudden you're making a video in also then hopes for those reactions, and then that just kind of creates that snowball. So that, I mean, this is just going to piss people off if you use it as a clip, but then ultimately, basically, you just made an NFT that has that smart contract that is just paying out for everybody who reacts to whatever. And now I'm canceled.
Let's go on to, these are some brilliant voice clips, by the way. I won't be able to use all of it because I'm trying to keep the video
It's your video, dude.
But
it's your video.
This is excellent.
Let's make them as shorts. And there we go. That's the problem.
Let's go to an interesting idea. So, the MMORPG is interesting because the opening experience is often very different to the endgame experience. And this means it's quite difficult to review, because if someone plays the game for 20 hours and makes a first impression, that's a completely valid first impression. This is what they experienced for 20 hours. But if that game then changes, is that first impression a valid representation of the game ultimately? Is this a problem with the pacing, the game design? If you make a video and you talk about the first impression, you as an MMORPG veteran know for a fact that when you play a brand new MMORPG, the opening experience is not going to be representative of the endgame experience. Highly unlikely it's going to be. If you ignore the opening experience in your review video, you're effectively saying to all of the brand new players, yeah, your experience doesn't matter, I'm just going to focus on the end game, which means you're almost validating the older player's experience. If you focus on the brand new player experience, you're almost saying to the old players, yeah, I'm not going to think about the end game yet, I'm just going to talk about the brand new stuff. How do you approach a first impression of a game? How do you approach a review when you know that it might not be representative of the actual experience of the game?
So I think for me, personally speaking, this also is a little bit different from how people approach and think of MMOs. Like I said, I look at an MMO is, does the end game begin at level 1? And
So
a
let
lot
my
of that
cat out
ends
1
up
second.
being, okay, you're good. Do you want me to keep talking or? Okay, I'll just wait.
I'll be able to cut the clip so it sounds like it's all natural and flowing. Don't worry about that.
The magic of editing. The magic of editing. All right, we ready? We
Talking
take
about
it?
level 1.
Yeah. So this for me is where I see MMORPGs in the mindset that does the end game begin at level 1, and a lot of that for me, as my personal enjoyment of MMOs, ties to a player-driven economy. That's I think is a critical aspect in how I would label an MMO as a feature that is a part of or should be included. But I know that not everybody agrees with that, and the reason I say that is that if the end game begins at level 1, then essentially what we're not talking about is end game that begins at the level cap, but content that actually starts at the level cap. And so then in that regards, the end game experience, I can talk about it from a new player, but then also ultimately I can get to, now let me talk about the new content that actually opens up once you get to level cap, as opposed to the end game that opens up once you get to level cap. And I think that actually does, in my mind, require that player driven economy, that player trade, because then content and its value proposition, whether it's intrinsic or extrinsic, in terms of its reward structure, all ties into what are people interested in and willing to pay for. And this actually, I think, helps reduce what I see as one of the problems within the current model, where I would even go on and honestly describe certain MMOs actually more as MMO lights, because they don't allow player trade, where I see more friction in the casual and the hardcore player, right? And obviously people can say there's, like you could say there's temperatures for any degree of that spectrum. But if I can benefit you, the hardcore player, by just crafting and gathering and just putting that stuff up on the market, and you have an avenue of that, and that lets you go beat that raid, ultimately we're actually working together, as opposed to I'm taking resources from new raids being made because they're trying to appease the casual. They're trying to appease that the player who's going to jump in and jump out and jump in and jump out. And I see this argument being made more and more by MMO fans. They're like, oh, we would have had a bigger raid. Or on the flip side, it would be nicer if there was more content for me. Not they were investing in all these hard end raids that I'm not going to get to take part in because I have this commitment or that commitment. And so I've seen modern MMOs actually kind of grow in that level of friction, as opposed to where, like, if, again, and I'm not saying I'm perfect at it, but it's like I look at it and say, it's not that the end game is different from the start of the game. Ideally, it's all the same. It's just new content that exists. And then I can then create videos that talk about the content experience rather than the end game experience. Because again, it should be the same experience.
That's a brilliant sound.
Just new content.
That last sentence, that is perfect. That sums it up really nicely. Let's go to the last question, which I think is really interesting for me personally. Whenever I'm playing a game to review or to analyze or to critique or to make content on it, I'm playing in a vastly different way than if I'm just playing to enjoy it. I have a notepad next to me, and I'll play for 5 minutes and then I'll write down all my experiences. I will open the menu and click on every single possible option to see if any of them are broken or if any of them do weird things. I will resize the window. I will try the start of every class. I'll talk to every NPC. In the Rift video, I was able to make like a 10-second throwaway joke that one of the starting shops sells something called Mudder's Milk, which is a reference to Firefly, because in Janestown they sell Mudder's Milk as a drink. But I was only able to find that because I spoke to every single NPC and browsed every shop and read every item, which a regular player is not going to do, and a long-term veteran player is definitely not going to do, because they know this is an opening area. The shop is irrelevant. You've already got all the healing items you need in your inventory given to you. When I play an MMO to review, I play it, if you were to watch me in game, I'd look like an idiot. I'd be jumping at the walls, I'd be running around, I'd have random items on, but I'm playing to analyze, to critique, not necessarily for fun. When you are creating content, how do you find your gameplay experience changes from playing to analyze for when you're playing for fun?
I think it's going to vary by content creator to content creator, because me saying that I think I should always be playing for fun, even in the analysis, is that it comes through the natural discovery. For me personally, my deeper dives are when the game then requires it of me. And so I get frustrated when I hear people say, "Oh, you're not efficient." I go, "The game's not requiring me to be efficient. There's no pushback, there's no feedback mechanism that says I'm doing anything wrong." And that's one of the things personally that I respect a lot about Elden Ring. Playing Elden Ring, all of a sudden it's like, "Oh, I'm doing something wrong. I need to figure out what that is." And so then I start going into the systems and into the menu and start reading to find out what I'm doing wrong. Therefore, that ends up being, but it's all for me personally being the approach of having fun. That being said, I think that's really, again, diving this all back to the kind of what I said earlier, is that in context is key to the player and also the viewer. Like, do you like Brian's review of a game because you also have kids and limited time? That's the value that I can bring in terms of the opinion that I approach it. And it's also understanding that this isn't to be used, but one of the things is that when I started doing stand-up comedy, I actually have been writing jokes for like 20 years. Like, I have a notebook of all of these jokes. What I realized when I go and looked at those jokes, I was like, oh, well, that's what I thought comedy was when I was 20. Like, I was looking at all these comedians and they're all talking about drug overdosing and all this stuff. And it's like, I don't do drugs. Like, I'm allergic to aspirin. Like, I'm not going to go try and discover what else I might be allergic to in this world. So it just never was anything, but I was trying to write jokes because that's what I thought, comedians did. But now it's like, no. I'm not trying to be something I'm not. I'm not trying to sit here and say like, yeah, guys, I got hundreds of hours of free time every week. I just stream all the time. No, because that's inauthentic to that regard. So as long as you're being authentic to the thing that you like, that's interesting to you, whether you're playing it for fun or for review, everybody's got their process. You're doing it right. So for me, like, I approach it from the stance of having fun and also from a balance perspective. And that's the key aspect. And I think that the reviews that I do that are well, hopefully communicate that understanding to the viewer, so that they can have the context. Because people will come in and they're like, I don't have kids. Like, I can play 40 hours of video games a week. I'm like, I get lucky if I get 10. Like, all right, guys, and can you play this MMO and enjoy it if you only have 10 hours of games a week? Yes or no? Then that's essentially kind of where I come from. But there are people, there is an audience, there's a community. Because I've seen some of your reviews or even guides that you're going through all the system menus and showing everything off. I'm like, that's interesting for the person who absolutely needs that. And that's not something that I personally am looking for, but that's the beauty of the internet and the beauty of the volume of people. Like, you know what, maybe you don't like a certain creator, or maybe you don't like a certain approach. Well, guess what? There's at least I would assume there's at least somebody else out there doing it. And if there's not, why the hell aren't you? If someone's not making the thing that you want, why don't you start? And that's actually the reason how I got started. I was sitting here watching these videos. I got these little kids around, and I started putting on headphones because a lot of the creators are F this and do that. Swear words don't bother me. Like, I played baseball. My wife swears like a sailor, but I was like, here I am watching a video with this toddler and some, big old words coming out of content creators' mouth because they're pissed off about something. I'll put on headphones, and then all of a sudden the kids start walking, and then all of a sudden I was like, well, you know what? I'm just like, I want to listen to something where I don't have to have headphones on, because I got to listen for the kid trying to climb up on the laundry machine or something. And so I just was like, well, I'm just gonna make that. And all of a sudden turns out, that actually is something that some people want. Not everybody. Some people feel like I'm inauthentic because they're like, Brian, he's just, he doesn't cuss. It's like, I do occasionally when I get really pissed off, but I try not to.
It's something anyway, that you saw a kind of gap in the market and you thought, I want to create content like this. Because what I tend to get is, I'll play 8 to 10 hours, I'll make a video, and someone will say to me, I can't believe you only got to that part in 8 hours. I got to that part in 2 hours. And I'm thinking, yeah, you probably did, but you also knew where all the transport links were, the fastest ways to do all the fights, you knew the best classes. I see it as the difference between speed reading a book as opposed to reading a book, breaking down the sentence structure, looking for the themes and narratives, and then writing a report on it. In an hour, I'll probably only make 30 to 40 minutes worth of progress because I'm spending the other 20 minutes analysing the progress that I have made. So gaming to critique for me is a lot slower than just gaming to play and have fun for me. But if I were to play a game for 8 hours make no notes, record nothing, and then sit down and be like, right, I've got to make a video, I would forget everything that I'd experienced. I need to make notes and write these things down.
Well, that's because of your theatrical background, right? You're breaking down the scenes, you're breaking down the beats, you're making those kind of notes so that you understand the scene and what is essentially being communicated, and also what the characters that you're trying to embody are then thinking through that. Because if you actually look at human speech, we've had it multiple times. You're on one train of thought, and then like without me like even visibly showing like, oh, I actually had a new thought that just kind of popped in naturally. And that's how people speak naturally. We're not all 100% scripted. So how do you take that and make it sound like a human, you know, rather than like, okay, here's just the written word, and oh, they didn't put a comma in here, but thought one transition to thought two.
That has been...
Yeah. It's time to chill out on the couch and read some comments. That's right. You know me when it comes to Destiny. I'm off with the clan, and I'm glad you're feeling better. Oh,